The last time Mara had seen her, it had been raining. Not the kind of rain that makes a moment feel important. Just rain. The kind that soaks through a jacket before you realize it's happening. The kind that makes the windshield too blurry to read someone's expression as they walk away. She told herself she didn't need to read it. She already knew what Jade's face looked like when she had made up her mind. That was 16 months ago. Mara was standing in the cereal aisle at a Kroger in downtown Columbus when it happened. She wasn't thinking about anything heavy. She was trying to decide between 2 boxes of granola, reading nutrition labels with the focused blankness of someone who has been alone long enough that grocery shopping has become a ritual. Something deliberate. Something that takes exactly as long as it needs to take. She heard the laugh first. She didn't know that right away. Not consciously. It was just a sound that moved through the air from somewhere behind her, and her body registered it before her mind caught up. She stopped reading the label. Her hand went still. There was a half second where nothing happened except that she was no longer thinking about granola, or the afternoon, or the specific gray quality of the light coming through the store windows. She turned. If you want to hear uncensored, too hot for YouTube stories, check out my Patreon in the description. Jade was standing at the end of the aisle, phone in hand, smiling at something on the screen. She was wearing a mustard-colored sweater that Mara had never seen before. Her hair was slightly shorter. She looked exactly the same and completely different. The way people do when you've spent 16 months trying to remember their face precisely. And then suddenly the real version is 3 feet away, correcting every mistake your memory made. She hadn't seen Mara yet. And Mara's first thought, not her second thought, not what she wished her first thought had been, was, I'm not ready for this. Her second thought arrived immediately after. Quiet and devastatingly honest. You're never going to be ready. That's the whole problem. You have to understand what kind of person Mara was before any of this makes sense. She was 31 years old and had lived in Columbus for 3 years after moving from Philadelphia for a job at an architecture firm that she liked but didn't love, in an apartment that she'd made comfortable but not quite home, in a life that fit the way a piece of furniture fits when you buy it slightly too big, and then just arrange everything else around it. She was steady. That was the word people used for her. Steady, reliable, the one who showed up on time and remembered things and didn't make scenes. Her mother called it a gift. Her ex-girlfriend from Philadelphia called it a wall with good manners. Mara didn't think either of them was entirely wrong. She'd had 2 relationships in her adult life, both with women, both good at the beginning, both ending in that specific quiet way where you realize one morning that you've been kind to each other for so long that neither of you remembers what you actually wanted when you started. She didn't grieve them loudly. She processed things like she did everything else. Internally, methodically. In the early hours of the morning when the apartment was still, and she could think in straight lines. She'd been fine. Genuinely fine. Not pretending fine, not keeping busy so she didn't have to think fine. Just fine. And then she met Jade at a colleague's dinner party 14 months before the granola aisle. And fine turned out to be a word that didn't mean what she'd thought it meant. Jade was different in a way that was difficult to articulate without sounding like you were reaching. She was a middle school science teacher on the east side of Columbus, which she described as professionally exhausting and genuinely the best thing I've ever done. And she had the energy of someone who meant both of those things simultaneously. She talked fast when she was interested in something and went quiet in a way that was full, rather than empty when she was thinking. She laughed at things Mara would never have expected to be funny, and then explained why, and the explanation was always better than the joke. At that first dinner, they'd ended up at the far end of the table talking for most of the night, while everyone else migrated toward the living room. Mara had noticed it happening and chosen not to stop it. That was unusual for her. She was someone who tracked the social architecture of a room and positioned herself accordingly, who was good at extracting herself from conversations before they became too much. She hadn't wanted to extract herself from Jade. She'd walked to her car afterward and sat in the parking lot for a few minutes before starting the engine. She told herself she was letting the heating warm up. It was late September. 62 degrees. They became friends the way that sometimes happens between adults, urgently, without trying, as if they'd been waiting on a delay. They started texting daily within 2 weeks. Jade had a gift for sending messages at the exact moment when Mara was thinking about her, which Mara cataloged and tried to rationalize and eventually stopped rationalizing entirely. They went to a farmer's market together on a Saturday morning in October and spent 4 hours moving between tables and arguing cheerfully about whether heirloom tomatoes justified the markup. Mara bought 3. She didn't particularly like tomatoes. They watched movies on opposite ends of the couch in Jade's apartment, a third-floor walk-up in German Village, with dark wood floors and plants in every window that she kept alive with what she described as aggressive consistency. Mara sat on one end of the couch with a blanket and watched the screen and was very aware, at all times, of exactly how much space existed between herself and the other end. She was aware. That was all. She was just aware. She told herself that was all. Jade was someone who had already done the work of knowing herself. She'd had a girlfriend in college, another in her mid-20s, and she talked about both with the honest clarity of someone who didn't need to revise the past to feel okay about the present. She was comfortable in her own life, in a way that Mara found simultaneously admirable and faintly terrifying. Mara was not someone who had done that work yet. She knew this. She knew it in the precise, intellectual way that you can know a thing completely without it changing anything. The first time something happened that didn't fit the story Mara was telling herself, it was a Wednesday in November. They were at Jade's apartment, late. The kind of late that happens when neither person has made a move to leave, and both of them are pretending not to notice. Jade had made tea that neither of them was drinking anymore. The television was on, but muted. They were talking about Jade's students, a girl named Priya who'd stayed after class to ask whether stars could feel lonely. And Jade was laughing at the memory, but also clearly moved by it, and Mara was watching her face, and then looked away, and then looked back. "You're good at this," Mara said. Jade turned. "At what?" "Caring. You do it like it's not costing you anything." Jade was quiet for a second. Not empty quiet. The kind that meant she was taking the thing seriously. "It costs," she said. "I've just decided it's worth it." She looked at Mara when she said it. Just for a moment. Just long enough. Mara picked up the tea she wasn't drinking and took a sip. That was the first time. After that, she started noticing things she hadn't let herself notice before. The way Jade tilted her head when she was listening to something she found genuinely interesting, like the weight of her attention could be felt physically. The specific way she said Mara's name at the start of a sentence when she was making a point. Not sharp, not soft, just precise. Like she thought the name itself was worth something. The fact that whenever they were in a room together, Mara always knew where Jade was without tracking her. Not watching. Just knowing. She noticed, and she categorized, and she told herself, this is just what it feels like to have a real friend. This is what I've been missing. This is normal. She repeated this at appropriate intervals. December came. They went to a holiday market downtown with Jade's colleague and friend Dana, who had originally hosted the dinner where they'd met, and who moved through the world with the cheerful, observational energy of someone who noticed everything, and had the grace not to say most of it. Dana watched the two of them argue about a vendor's unnecessarily complicated hot chocolate menu for about 90 seconds, and then said she needed to find a bathroom, and then was gone for 20 minutes. When she came back, she said nothing, just smiled, and handed them each a cup of the hot chocolate, and the three of them walked on. Mara didn't think about that until later. January was hard in a way she couldn't fully justify. She was busy at work, a commercial project that required long hours, and the kind of focused attention that usually felt satisfying. She had less time for Jade. The texts became every other day, then every few days. Mara told herself this was natural, was healthy, was what happened when two people had full lives. She checked her phone more than she used to. She noticed when Jade sent a message in the evening that she'd been at an exhibit at the Columbus Museum of Art. Alone. Mara had been to that museum exactly once and had thought it would be better with someone who actually cared about the work. She typed, "I didn't know you were going. I would have come." She deleted it. She typed, "How was it?" She sent that. Jade sent back a voice note instead of typing, which she did sometimes, and Mara listened to it twice. The first time for the content, which was lovely. Jade had a specific way of describing visual things that made you see them. And the second time without really absorbing the words, just listening to the texture of her voice in the apartment on a Tuesday night. She put her phone face down after the second listen. She sat with that for a minute. Then she opened her laptop and worked for 3 more hours, and did not think about it. February brought them back together in a way that felt unplanned, but probably wasn't. Jade texted on a Friday afternoon, asking if Mara wanted to drive out to a state park the next morning. Her friend group had canceled. She'd been looking forward to it. The trails would be cold and mostly empty, and she'd found a coffee place in the town nearby that had a wood-burning fireplace. Mara typed yes before she finished reading the message. They drove out early. Jade brought a playlist she'd made that was half folk and half things Mara didn't recognize but immediately wanted to find later. The park was beautiful in the way that February parks are sometimes beautiful. Stripped down, honest, everything that isn't structure removed by cold and time. They walked for 2 hours on trails that were nearly empty. And they talked about everything and nothing. And at some point the talking slowed. And they were just walking. At the top of a rise, Jade stopped and looked out over a frozen lake below. The sun was coming through the trees at a low angle, and the ice caught it in a way that made everything look momentarily like something else. Mara stopped beside her. They stood close, not touching. Their breath was visible in the cold. "I needed this," Jade said. She didn't look at Mara. She said it to the lake, or to the air, or just into the morning. "Me too," Mara said. And then neither of them said anything for a while. And it was the easiest silence Mara could remember being inside of. On the drive back, stopped at a light in the small town, Jade reached over to turn up a song on the playlist. Her hand crossed in front of Mara to reach the center console. It was 2 seconds. It was nothing. Jade turned up the song and sat back and started talking about the coffee place, about the fireplace, about whether a wood-burning fireplace in a cafe was a liability concern or a vibe concern. Mara agreed it was probably both. She kept her hands on the wheel. She did not say anything. She did not do anything. She drove. After that, she started to recede in ways she thought were subtle. She was less available. She let texts sit longer before answering. She found reasons to cancel plans that weren't exactly lies. She was busy, she was tired, work was a lot, and she let those reasons pile up into a small, convincing wall. She told herself she was being responsible. She was protecting something. She was not sure what exactly, but the feeling of needing to protect it was very clear. Jade noticed. She didn't say anything directly. That wasn't her style. But she stopped initiating as much. She gave the silence space. And Mara felt that space open between them, and was aware, at all times, of its exact dimensions. One evening in March, she was in her apartment, sitting on the floor with her back against the couch, unable to explain why she hadn't moved to the couch itself. She was looking at a text from Jade that said only, "You doing okay?" 3 words, no weight attached, completely deniable as anything other than a friendly check-in. And Mara sat there on the floor and thought, No, I'm not doing okay. I'm doing something that I don't know how to name, and it is using up a significant portion of the energy I was previously spending on being fine. She typed, "Yeah, just tired. Busy week. Talk soon." She sent it. She put the phone down. She sat on the floor for another 15 minutes, doing nothing, in the very specific stillness of someone who has made a decision they're not sure they can hold. Dana took her to lunch in April. This was Dana's idea. Dana had an instinct for timing that she deployed without fanfare, the way someone might reach out a hand on a set of stairs, not drawing attention to it, just there. They ordered food and talked about normal things, and then Dana said, with the tone of someone finishing a sentence she'd already started in her head, "She misses you." Mara looked up. "Jade?" Dana said, helpfully, as if there were ambiguity. "She doesn't say it like that, but I know her." Mara looked at her water glass. "We've both been busy." "Sure." A silence. "Mara." "I know," Mara said, quietly, not arguing. Dana looked at her for a moment with the expression of someone who is deciding how far to go. "She told me once," Dana said, "that she thinks you're the most interesting person she's met in years. And I've known Jade for 9 years, so I know what she means when she says that." Mara said nothing. "I'm not telling you what to do," Dana said. "I'm just telling you what I see." They ate their lunch. They talked about other things. Dana did not bring it up again. Mara drove home and sat in the parking garage for a while with the engine off. But before we get to what happened next, if you've made it this far, it's because something in this story already knows your name. That feeling of standing in your own life and watching yourself step back from the exact thing you want most. You've felt it. Maybe you're feeling it right now. So if this story is doing something to you, hit the like button. It tells the algorithm this matters, and it helps me keep bringing stories like this one to you. And if you're not subscribed yet, subscribe now and turn on the bell. That way YouTube lets you know the moment something new goes up here. Now tell me in the comments, have you ever pushed someone away because getting close felt like losing control? Have you ever been the one who waited? Write it for me. I read every single one. And tell me what city you're watching from. I'll leave a heart. Now, back to Mara, back to the cereal aisle, back to Jade at the end of it, scrolling her phone, unaware. Mara had 2 options in the following 4 seconds, and she was aware of both, with the crystalline clarity that sometimes arrives in moments when the body has already decided and is simply waiting for the mind to agree. She could turn around. She could take her granola to another aisle, pay at self-checkout, leave the Kroger, and drive home. And the 16 months of careful distance she had constructed would remain standing, and she would go back to her apartment, and her fine life, and the version of herself that she had trained into steadiness, and it would be okay. That was one option. She stood there, and something cracked open in her chest that she recognized, finally and without the luxury of denial, as grief. Not for the distance. Not even entirely for Jade. For herself. For the 16 months she'd spent protecting something that hadn't needed protecting, or that had needed the wrong kind of protection. For every text she'd delayed and every plan she'd canceled and every evening she'd spent convincing herself that the wanting was something to manage rather than something to listen to. She'd been so sure that control was the same thing as safety. She'd been so sure that knowing your limits was the same as wisdom. She turned back toward the end of the aisle. Jade had looked up from her phone. Their eyes met. There was a long second. The kind that takes up more space than a second should. The kind that the body holds differently than the mind does. And then Jade's face did something that Mara had not expected, that she did not have a category for, that broke open the last reasonable explanation she'd been holding. It didn't go carefully neutral. It didn't freeze. It didn't do the polite thing. It softened. Not with hurt. Not with performance. Just with the absolute helpless softening of someone who sees a thing they have been trying not to need and feels the trying dissolve. "Hi," Jade said. Her voice was normal. It was the most normal voice Mara had ever heard, and it undid her completely. "Hi," Mara said. They stood in the cereal aisle. "I've been," Mara started. stopped. Jade waited. She was good at waiting. She had always been good at waiting. "I've been really stupid," Mara said, "about a lot of things, for a fairly long time." The corner of Jade's mouth moved. Not quite a smile. Something more real than a smile. "I know," she said. "You knew. I had a theory. You didn't say anything. You weren't ready to hear anything." She said it without accusation. Just as a fact, the way she described the natural world to 12-year-olds. This is what is true. This is simply what is true. Mara exhaled. It was a long exhale, the kind that had been cued for 16 months. "I'm sorry," she said. She stopped again. The words kept catching on something. "Hey." Jade's voice went quieter. "I'm still here." And there it was. The thing that Mara hadn't let herself understand until now. This whole time, she'd been telling a story about herself as the steady one, the careful one. The one who didn't make messes, and didn't lose control, and understood the architecture of her own life. She'd been so committed to that version of herself that she'd treated her own heart like a liability. Something to be managed. Something that required oversight. And in the meantime, here was Jade. Jade, who had said, "I'm still here," with the matter-of-fact certainty of someone who had been saying it the whole time, quietly, in the space between every text and every silence and every plan she'd waited for Mara to cancel. Jade, who had always been the one who knew herself. Jade, who was not, as it turned out, untouched by any of this. Jade, who had softened, who had not gone neutral, who had waited in the full and costly sense of the word, and was standing in a Kroger in Columbus on a Thursday afternoon, still willing to say, "I'm still here." Mara had spent 16 months believing that she was the vulnerable one, that Jade was clear and certain and orbiting a life that didn't have this particular turbulence in it. She'd constructed the whole story on that foundation. Mara as the one who needed to be careful, Jade as the one for whom this was simpler. She looked at Jade now and saw it for the first time. It had not been simpler for Jade. It had cost Jade exactly as much as it had cost Mara, just differently, just in the directions that someone pays when they know what they want and are willing to wait for the other person to catch up. Jade was not the one with all the answers. She was just the one who had already decided that wanting something was not a thing to punish yourself for. "I have to pay for these," Mara said. She was still holding the granola. "Okay," Jade said. "Do you want to get coffee after?" A pause. One heartbeat. "I thought you'd never ask," Jade said. They didn't go for coffee. They stood in the parking lot for 40 minutes instead, leaning against Mara's car in the gray afternoon light, and they talked. Really talked, the way they had at the beginning, except now without the careful shape of not saying certain things. Mara talked. She was not someone who talked easily about interior things, who had been told her whole life that steadiness was a virtue without being told that steadiness can become a place to hide. She said this, haltingly, not in those exact words, but in the specific language of someone trying to be honest with someone who has earned it. Jade listened the way she always listened, fully, with that quality of attention that Mara had catalogued in November and rationalized and eventually stopped rationalizing. She didn't rush it. She didn't fill the pauses. At some point, a woman with a shopping cart gave them a mildly confused look as she passed, and they both saw it at the same moment and laughed. And the laugh broke something that needed breaking, and after that, it was easier. "I kept thinking," Mara said, "that the problem was that I didn't know what I wanted. And now I think the problem was that I knew exactly what I wanted, and I was terrified of it." Jade looked at her. Long. Steady. "Those are very different problems," she said. "I know. The second one is fixable." Mara looked down at the granola she had paid for, and was now holding in the parking lot like an artifact from a life she was leaving behind. "I know," she said again, differently this time. The afternoon light had shifted. The gray had gone warmer at the edges, the specific late Thursday light of a city in March where winter isn't done, but something else is already starting. Jade did not reach for her hand. She didn't make a gesture. She just looked at Mara with the full, undefended clarity that had been there. Mara now understood from the very beginning. That openness that Mara had been treating like a risk rather than an offering. And she was just there, present, patient in a way that cost something and was given anyway. Mara had spent 31 years believing that the brave thing was not needing too much. She was beginning to understand, standing in a grocery store parking lot in Columbus on an ordinary Thursday, that the brave thing was something else entirely. It was this, right here, staying in the parking lot instead of driving away, saying the true thing instead of the safe thing, looking at someone who had softened when they saw you, and deciding, finally, that you didn't need to make that mean anything smaller than it was. "Can I take you to dinner?" Mara asked. Actual dinner. Not coffee. Something moved through Jade's expression that Mara wanted to learn the name of. Something that wasn't quite relief and wasn't quite triumph. Something that looked like a long exhale. "Yes," Jade said, simply, like it was the easiest word in the world. And it was. It turned out to be the easiest word in the world. Mara had spent a very long time believing that the steadiest version of herself was the truest version. She was wrong. The truest version was the one standing in a parking lot, holding a box of granola she didn't particularly need, choosing to stay. Not because she had become fearless, because she had decided that what she wanted was worth the fear. If this story reached you somewhere real, write Discovery in the comments. That's how I know you stayed until the end. And if you want more stories like this one, stories about the feelings we almost miss because we're too busy managing them, click the video that's appearing on your screen right now. A big hug, and until the next story.